As Johnny Carson's career grew stronger, so did the pressure around him. Every night, millions of people tuned into The Tonight Show, expecting perfect humor, smooth conversations, and effortless control. But behind that calm surface, small cracks were slowly forming in his relationships with guests, comedians, and even close colleagues. In the entertainment world, Carson held a powerful position, and that power shaped how people treated him and how he responded when he felt disrespected. Some moments were small misunderstandings, while others became emotional turning points that quietly changed careers and friendships forever. What makes these stories important is not just the conflict itself, but the way silence, pride, and respect played a role in every situation. Slowly building a hidden side of one of television's most loved figures, Point, one of the most well-known examples of Carson's complicated relationships, involved comedian Don Rickles, a man famous for his sharp humor and fearless personality. Rickles was known for joking about anything and anyone, often pushing the limits of comedy without hesitation. During one appearance, a small but meaningful incident happened involving a personal item on Carson's desk. What may have seemed like a simple mistake to others became something more serious to Carson, because he valued order, respect, and personal boundaries on his set. Instead of ignoring it or laughing it off completely, Carson chose to respond in a way that surprised many people, turning a private irritation into a public moment. The situation quickly became uncomfortable, but it also turned into unexpected entertainment, as both men used humor to ease the tension. Still, beneath the laughter, there was a clear message. Carson expected respect, even in a world built on jokes. Another important moment in Carson's career involved Wayne Newton, a popular singer and entertainer. At first, Carson's jokes about Newton seemed light and harmless, as part of his regular monologue style. But over time, the jokes became more personal and began touching on topics that Newton did not find funny. In the entertainment industry, public jokes can feel very different to the person being talked about, especially when they are repeated or become more pointed. Eventually, Newton decided he had heard enough and chose to confront Carson directly. This was not done in front of cameras or an audience, but in a private and serious setting at NBC Studios. The conversation reportedly became intense, with both men expressing strong emotions. Unlike many situations where Carson maintained control, this time he was faced with direct resistance. After that meeting, the joke stopped completely, showing that even someone as powerful as Carson had limits when faced with personal confrontation and pressure. There were also quieter conflict in Carson's career that did not involve loud arguments, but still had a strong emotional impact. One example involved actor Raymond Burr, who was known for serious and respected roles in television. Over time, Carson made repeated jokes about Burr's appearance during his monologues. While audiences often laugh, Burr himself did not appreciate being the target of those jokes. Instead of reacting publicly, he chose a more private approach, asking for the jokes to stop. However, the situation did not change, and the humor continued. Eventually, Burr made a quiet but powerful decision to stop appearing on the show altogether. There was no public statement, no dramatic exit, and no confrontation on camera. He simply stepped away. This silent response sent a strong message, showing that not all disagreements need words or arguments to have an impact. Sometimes, absence itself becomes the loudest answer. Point. One of the most shocking moments linked to Carson involved writer and public figure Jacqueline Suzanne. During her appearance on The Tonight Show, Carson made comments about her work and personality that many viewers felt were disrespectful. Although the audience laughed during the show, the tone of the interview created discomfort that was not visible on the surface. Suzanne remained professional during the broadcast, but the situation did not end there. After the show, at a private gathering, she approached Carson directly and reacted in a very unexpected way by throwing a drink in his face. This moment shocked everyone present and immediately changed the mood of the room. Unlike many other conflicts in Carson's life, this one became physical and personal, showing how deeply words can affect people even after the cameras stop rolling. It also showed that public humor sometimes carries private consequences that cannot be controlled once emotions take over. Another important situation involved Vanessa Williams, who made history as the first black woman to win the Miss America title. Her achievement was widely celebrated and marked a major moment in entertainment and cultural history. However, Shortly after her appearance on Carson's show, one of his monologue jokes about her win created controversy. While the joke may have been intended as humor, many viewers and critics felt it cross a line and did not respect the importance of her achievement. Williams handled the situation with dignity and calmness, choosing not to engage in public conflict. Carson did not strongly address the issue afterward, and the situation gradually faded from headlines. Still, it remained a reminder that comedy, especially on a national stage, can sometimes clash with social change and public sensitivity, creating lasting impressions even without direct confrontation. As these stories show, Johnny Carson's career was not only about laughter and success, but also about complex human relationships shaped by power, pride, and emotion. Some conflicts were loud and public, while others were silent and personal, but all of them added depth to his legacy. Behind the confident smile of a television legend was a man navigating constant pressure, where every joke, decision, and reaction carried weight far beyond the studio lights. These moments remind us that even the most admired figures in entertainment live complicated lives, where respect and misunderstanding often exist side by side, shaping history in ways audiences rarely see. A.S. Johnny Carson's influence in television continued to grow, so that the number of stories connected to tension, disagreement, and emotional distance behind the scenes. While the public saw him as a calm and controlled host, the entertainment world around him was often more complicated than it appeared on camera. In many cases, small moments turned into long-lasting consequences, not because of loud arguments, but because of silence, pride, and the importance of respect in a high-pressure industry. What makes these stories especially interesting is that they were not always dramatic fights or public scandals. Instead, there were often quiet turning points where relationships changed forever without any clear ending, showing how fragile trust can be even in the world of fame and success. One of the most interesting patterns in Carson's career was how humor could slowly turn into tension without anyone fully noticing at first. Carson was a master of comedy timing, and his monologues were a key part of success. However, comedy that works for an audience does not always feel the same for the person being joked about. Over time, some celebrities began to feel uncomfortable with how they were being portrayed on national television, especially when jokes became more personal or repeated. In the world of late-night television, there's always a thin line between entertainment and offense, and Carson's show often existed right on that line. This created situations where laughter on stage was followed by silence off stage, and that contrast slowly built emotional distance between Carson and certain guests. Another situation that reflects this pattern involved moments where guests chose to step away from the show rather than continue appearing regularly. In entertainment, being invited back is often seen as a sign of respect and approval, so when some figures stopped returning, it was not always explained publicly. In many cases, these decisions were quiet but meaningful. They did not involve public statements or visible arguments, but instead reflected personal discomfort or disagreement behind the scenes. Carson, known for maintaining control of the professional environment, often responded to such situations by simply moving forward with his work. However, even without open conflict, these absences were noticed by audiences and industry insiders, adding to the idea that not every relationship in Hollywood remained stable under pressure. As time passed, Carson's position in television gave him both admiration and responsibility, but also created expectations that were difficult to manage. When someone becomes a dominant figure in an industry, every word and action carries more weight than before. A joke can become a headline, a disagreement can become a story, and a private moment can turn into public discussion. This environment made communication more sensitive, and even small misunderstandings had the potential to grow into long-term distance. In Carson's case, many of these situations were not the result of single events, but rather a buildup of repeated moments where feelings were not fully addressed. This is why his legacy includes both admiration for his talent and reflection on the complexity of his relationships. One important theme that appears again and again in these stories is control. Carson was known for being in control of his stage, his timing, and his performance. But control in personal relationships is not always the same as control in entertainment. While he could guide a live audience with ease, personal emotions and reactions from others could not always be managed in the same way. When someone felt hurt, ignored, or disrespected, the reaction did not always follow a predictable path. Some people confronted him directly, while others stepped away quietly, and some simply stopped engaging without explanation. This mix of responses created a pattern where conflict did not always look like conflict, but instead appeared as distant silence or absence over time as the years went on. These smaller tensions began to form a larger picture of Carson's career beyond the laughter. He was still widely respected, still incredibly successful, and still one of the most important figures in television history. But alongside that success was a growing awareness that fame comes with emotional complexity. The people who appeared on his show were not just performers. They were individuals with their own pride, feelings, and limits. When those limits were crossed, even unintentionally, the response could shape future interactions in ways that were not always visible to the audience watching at home. This created a hidden layer of television history that existed behind the jokes and applause. Reflecting on these moments, it becomes clear that Johnny Carson's story is not just about comedy or entertainment, but about human relationships under constant public attention. Every interaction carried meaning, and every reaction had consequences, even if they were not immediately visible. Some relationships ended quietly, some changed over time, and some were never fully repaired. Yet none of these moments erased his impact on television. Instead, they added depth to his legacy, showing that even the most admired public figures live within a complex mix of success, pressure, and emotional reality. In the end, these stories remind us that fame does not remove human emotion. It often intensifies it. Johnny Carson's career was built on making people laugh. But behind that laughter was a world of real feelings, quiet conflicts, and unspoken decisions. His legacy is not only defined by the joy he brought to millions, but also by the complicated human experiences that came with being at the center of American entertainment for decades. As Johnny Carson's long career continued to shape American television, the gap between public image and private reality became more noticeable through the stories connected to him. While audiences remembered him for smooth humor and effortless hosting, the industry around him carried memories of disagreements, silent breaks in relationships, and moments where humor crossed into discomfort. These were not always dramatic events, but rather small turning points that, over time, created lasting effects. In many ways, Carson's story is not only about entertainment success, but also about how influence, timing, and emotion can quietly shape relationships in a world where everything is seen through a public lens. His legacy is built on both admiration and complexity, showing that even the most controlled public figures are still human behind the scenes. One of the most important ideas that comes from Carson's career is how power changes relationships. As the host of one of the biggest television shows in the world, he had the ability to shape careers simply by giving someone a platform. Appearing on his show could boost a celebrity's popularity instantly, while being removed or ignored could reduce visibility in a very competitive industry. This created a unique dynamic where respect, timing, and communication became extremely important. In such an environment, even small misunderstandings could feel much larger than they would in everyday life. When emotions were involved, decisions sometimes became permanent, and that permanence is what made many of these stories so impactful years later. At the same time, Carson's humor played a central role in both his success and his conflicts. Comedy is powerful because it connects people through laughter, but can also create distance when it touches sensitive areas. What made Carson so effective as a performer was his ability to read audiences and deliver jokes with perfect timing. However, not every joke landed the same way for everyone. Some people saw humor, while others saw disrespect. This difference in perception is what led to many of the tensions associated with his name. In entertainment, context matters deeply, and Carson's stage often turned personal subjects into public moments, which not everyone was comfortable with over time. Another important aspect of the story is silence. In many of the conflicts linked to Carson, there were no official statements, no public arguments, and no dramatic explanations. Instead, relationships often ended quietly. Someone would stop appearing on the show. A conversation would not be followed up. An invitation would not be repeated. This silence is powerful because it leaves space for interpretation, and over time, those gaps became part of his larger legacy. Unlike loud scandals that are quickly resolved or forgotten, silent endings tend to last longer in memory because they are never fully explained. They remain as unfinished stories in the history of entertainment. Despite these tensions, it is important to understand that Carson was also deeply respected by many of his peers. He remained a dominant figure in television for decades, and his influence helped define what late-night entertainment became. His ability to stay relevant for so long shows not only talent, but also discipline and awareness of audience expectations. Many performers who appeared on his show described the experience as career-changing in a positive way. This balance between admiration and conflict is what makes his legacy complex rather than one-dimensional. He was not simply a comedian or a host. He was a central figure in an evolving entertainment system where relationships carry both opportunity and risk. In the end, the stories connected to Johnny Carson reveal more than just isolated incidents. They show a pattern of how fame interacts with human emotion. Respect, misunderstanding, humor, and pride all played roles in shaping his interactions with others. Some relationships lasted, some quietly ended, and some changed permanently after a brief moment of tension. But through it all, Carson remained one of the most influential television figures in history. His success is undeniable. Yet his story also reminds us that even the most polished public image is supported by a private world that is far more complicated. Ultimately, Johnny Carson's legacy is not defined by a single moment, but by a long career filled with both laughter and complexity. He entertained millions,